Dear Redditors, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? My ex-husband's drug dealer came busting through the front door with just me home.
Huh?
I had just enough time to hide in my walk-in closet under a huge pile of blankets. He was on the phone to someone while ransacking the house and screaming that he was going to them up when I find them. I had my phone with me, and like a bad horror movie, I called 911 and was whispering for help. He opened the closet I was in but didn't see me.
Bruh.
I am anxious now just thinking of it. The cops came in 2 or 3 minutes, and he ran off. They caught him a few minutes later. But that's as scared as I can ever remember being. I had an asthma attack once so bad that I could barely communicate with the 911 operator. I just stood in my driveway with my wallet in my hand leaning against a tree gasping for air and hoping that she understood me. As the sirens got closer, I held on for as long as I could and then let go and my view faded to black. I woke up 10 days later in the ICU. When I was 12, I got my tonsils out. Went home and kept telling my parents I tasted blood. They told me it was just from the surgery and not to worry. A week later, my mom left me home alone for the first time since the surgery to run errands. I was in bed watching TV and started coughing and then vomiting copious amounts of blood. Everywhere. It wouldn't stop coming, and then I started choking on it because some had coagulated in my stomach. I managed to call 911 and they found me in the kitchen, and it looked like a freaking murder scene. It turns out the doctor had accidentally made a small cut in a blood vessel, and I'd been slowly bleeding for a week. I'd lost half the blood in my body. They immediately rushed me back to surgery, said it was fixed and sent me home. Well, a week later, I kept telling my mom I tasted it again. Again, I was told don't worry. That night I woke up vomiting blood again and passed out. Another surgery fixed it. Nightmare. The day I woke up to my parents freaking out because my brother had gone missing overnight, with a suicide note left behind. The fear over the next 12 hours was agonizing while we searched for him. But nothing compared to the agony of having our worst fears confirmed. I work on work ships, and for a brief period in 2015, or 2016, not sure right now, I was working in Nigerian waters. The ship's policy was only to allow work on deck during daylight hours due to pirate threats, then to lock the vessel down at night. Well, one night there was emergency work that needed to be done, so we were out on deck, ready to start just waiting for the work permit, and for whatever reason it never came, so we packed up and went back inside, locking up behind us. About half an hour after we locked up we were attacked by a small group of pirates. I still remember the unreal feeling of looking out my cabin window and seeing a guy suddenly climbing onto the main deck with an AK. The whole ship went into emergency lockdown and we all went to the safe room deep inside the engine room where we spent the night sleeping on the steel floor waiting for help to come. The Nigerian Navy had been nearby and received our calls for help but didn't want to board at night, so they only did a security sweep of the boat the next morning. In the end nothing was stolen, no one was kidnapped because we had locked down and the pirates must have been after ransom. I used to hitchhike all over the place. Once I got in a car with a guy who would not let me out of his car. I had to jump out of his car when it was going about 40 miles an hour down the highway. I never hitchhiked again. Used to put in drop ceilings for a living and did a big wing at a school for deaf children that already had a reputation for being haunted. Me and my boss went in on a Saturday because if you've ever worked construction you know it's awesome to be the only ones there and not have to work around 10 other teams of people because you can get 2 days of work done in one day. But anyways, it was creepy enough to scare me and him, which were around 40 years old and 50 years old at the time, lol. We started on opposite ends of a long hallway and planned to meet in the middle. For like an hour I'm on my first room and Kenny starts working in the room next to me instead of in the opposite end of the hallway, but whatever, so I walk over to the next room before I go smoke and he's not there and I see some of his tools and at the end of the hall, and man, I've got goosebumps at this point because it was just obvious he was in the room next to me and not like 50 yards away. I walk down the hall and ask him if he just came down here and he mentioned something about me working in the room right to him, and in that instance my eyes and his are both drawn to the doorway of the room we're in and it's as if like I could see something in my peripheral but couldn't begin to describe anything about it, and he looks at me like let's get the fuck out of here. We left all our shit and never worked places alone anymore. It's like almost 15 years later AMD I still get crazy goosebumps and my eyes start watering when I think about this. There was a bit more weird shit that happened there, but this is the basic gist I guess. I used to live in a pretty creepy house as well, but that's another story. I lost my mom when I was very young and I never got over it. So when I was a teenager, I used to cry all the time about it. Until I started getting nightmares of her telling me that she'll take me with her if I don't stop remembering her. Many years passed, and now I just don't think about her at all. I hope she's happy wherever she's now. Maybe not that scary, but it was when my grandpa didn't show up for Christmas dinner and I went to look for him. I walked the whole way from my family's house to his, hoping to run into him. When I didn't and entered the house, the lights were out, and it was already dark outside, and I had a really bad feeling. Really thought I will go into that house and find my passed away grandpa. Luckily, he was alive, and only had fallen down and broken his hip, and thus couldn't get up. Thankfully, he is doing fantastic now and is recovering very well, but yeah, that was a very scary 15 minutes, felt like hours. Civil war broke out. Happened during a school day. Wasn't safe to go home. Entire school full of kids not wanting to be killed just for trying to make school important and impactful for their future benefit. Wasn't safe for our parents to come collect us until something like 3 a.m. We were just a whole school full of kids that could have been slaughtered by the Civil War. I should perhaps point out I am an expat and was born and raised in Jakarta. I'm essentially referencing the British International School, Jakarta, and the 1996 to 1998 period of unrest that Indonesia was experiencing. Basically the richest school in Indonesia, and all the students knew that. Which only made our fear more valid because killing the rich was essentially what the whole thing erupted over. We were the kids of the wealthy, so were more than valid targets. It was actually so terrifying that it was then I actually gave up on everything. Schoolwork, being accepted, whatever. It instilled in me the awareness that no matter what I try or do, the catastrophic disaster recovery is the only skill worth putting any effort into. I will never have control over my destiny. The eternal universe will always throw whatever it wants at me and never cared about me having an opinion in the first place. I went for a walk with my dog around 10:30 p.m. one night. As soon as we walk out the door, he becomes agitated. I figured he just needed to go. As we walk down the driveway, I hear rustling and see a large dark shape in the neighbor's yard a few feet away. We dashed to the street because a bear had climbed down and was now between us and the door. It walked away without incident, but my dog still needed to poop. Actually, I'm too young to remember this. However, my mother always tells this story. Apparently, when I was younger, like barely able to speak, I was sitting on the floor with my mom, nonchalantly playing with some toys, when I simply said, "When I was in heaven, I met a woman who said you'd be the perfect mommy for me." I apparently believed that I was in heaven before birth, and that an angel looked at me and chose the mother I went to. My mother asked me to describe the woman, and I apparently perfectly described my mother's great-grandmother. Right down to the color of the eyes. I'd never met or seen a picture of my great-great-grandmother. One time I was playing Xbox in my girlfriend's room, and half of a boiled potato flew in the window. The neighbor to that direction is an old lady. My theory is a crow was carrying it back to its nest and lost it. No one believes me.